Good morning or afternoon, everybody. My name is Brian Smith. I'm with Tennant Company. I want to welcome you to the second in our Education Facilities webinar series. Today we'll be talking about workplace and student safety and the impact cleaning have on safety. We're proud to welcome back Dave Frank, who is going to be presenting today and is partnering with us on this webinar series. Dave is the president of the American Institute for Cleaning Sciences and has been in our industry for over 37 years and has been a leading authority on serving facility providers, driving efficiencies for cleaning operations, and working closely with manufacturers and distributors on strategic thinking. He's also worked very closely with a number of associations, including ISSA and APA, including really being the architect and champion for the SIMS certification program through ISSA, of which I am a proud graduate, and has really done wonderful things for our industry, and we're really feel very lucky to have him with us here today. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dave, and want to thank everybody for coming. If you have any questions along the way, we will be doing a Q&A. Feel free to chat those questions to us through the chat functionality in WebEx, and we will address those questions during the Q&A period. So, but you can submit those questions at any time. So with that, Dave, over to you.
Thank you, Brian. Good morning and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This particular topic is a topic that a lot of people find a little bit dry. Some people look at it as the regulation side of our business, but it is by far the most important component of facilities management when you're running a custodial operation or if you're a contract cleaner. So whether it's in-house or whether it's a contract cleaner, this has major financial implications to the bottom line, and it also can create absenteeism and workers' comp claims and rehabilitation, and the monies that's spent doing training and focusing on assessing what the injury was that injury reoccurring, and is there a way to prevent that injury from occurring, I think is a minimal investment compared to the tens of thousands and the millions of dollars that people spend. Because our industry is so labor intensive, you've got over 3.2 million cleaning workers within the U.S., and then if you get up into Canada, the number gets exponentially higher. And on a global scale, some countries don't have the regulatory component that not forces but encourages employers to focus on workplace safety, and it's not just in our industry, it's in other industries as well. Now, some of you that may be in universities or in school districts, you may have a health, safety, and environmental manager who has a safety policy, who does safety training and gives oversight to it. So we won't be very long on this webinar, but we do want to make sure that we cover how to perform an assessment, things to look at, and then some tips as it relates directly to cleaning and cleaning operations that we feel will be helpful. One is that we can perform a site-based audit, and we can determine by looking at records what those injuries were, what was the cause of those injuries, whether it was an injury to a student or to an occupant of the building, but mostly for the sake of this session, I want to focus on frontline workers. We're a big advocate for frontline worker safety. We know that we have an aging workforce, and it's not just an aging workforce in our industry, it's an aging workforce across the entire industry. But it does have an effect on ours because the nature of the work is physical. And we're one of the most physical service sectors within the top 5 service sectors, which means our injuries always fall into the top 4 or 5 as it relates to OSHA and then the SIC codes of which the insurance companies will track. And so the tracking mechanism is critical if you're going to look at ways to remediate any potential injuries or risks that are happening in the workplace. So frontline workers, these are our people, and these are the people that are committed to cleaning. They make careers out of our business. Some people come in and out, but there's no reason to unnecessarily put somebody potentially in harm's way because of either the chemicals that we use or the equipment or the types of tasks or the types of things that we do for cleaning. All of the safety components of this presentation have citations. and that's important in case you want to get a copy of this presentation. If you're looking for any of these documents, you can click on the hyperlink at the bottom of each slide, and that will connect you to that. On the right is a hazardous communication. Hazardous communication programs are by law required, and then underneath that falls in the new SDS sheets with the new 9 placards and the new 16-section SDS sheets. That are now global in nature as the platform, so that the global manufacturers of chemicals can have one platform for all the areas that they serve. It is critical to know the regulations and to know the compliance. And what we see is we saw a contract cleaner who wanted to move into healthcare. And what happened is that they think that cleaning a healthcare facility is the same as cleaning an office building, and it's not. And OSHA came in, and they didn't have a bloodborne pathogens program, and they didn't have a policy, and they didn't have the hepatitis B shots. And basically what it was is they didn't know the law. And I'm not sure if the distributor that was servicing that contractor made them aware of that law or what those regulations are, but it was one of the highest fines that we witnessed within our business, and the fine got to be as high as $60,000 for one individual site because somebody ignored the citation the first time it occurred, and the repeat citations can be 2, 3, 5 times higher, sometimes 10 times higher than the initial fine if they feel as though there's been some malfeasance or some form of neglect. So there are state agencies that also understand OSHA. There may be some local provisions, but there's also the national oversight. And it's not to penalize people. It's really to help them lower their costs, create awareness, and to make sure that we're doing things that are focused on workplace safety. These give you some statistics, and this starts to show you how high this can be. And it's everything from our industry, we don't have any regulations like on steel toe boots. We don't have regulations that say you have to wear stripper shoes when you're stripping a floor. These are all things that we certainly encourage, but the whole issue really is around the third bullet is what is the culture of the organization, and do we have someone that's the champion or that's assigned to performing these safety assessments, to looking at equipment within the field, looking at all the tools that we use, and then what is the process that we're using, and are these processes safe? And sometimes what we see is someone's using cheap vinyl gloves when they should be using a nitro glove, and that information would be on the SDS sheet. But the issue of safety culture, making sure that safety is woven into the fabric of the operation, is the most critical component in addition to performing the actual assessment. This gives you some numbers. WC is workers' comp costs, and workers' comp costs and insurance rates continue to rise. Now, the way that this works is it's not overly complicated, but the insurance companies have an SIC code that's directly related to employees in the cleaning industry. And so if you say, well, I'm a contract cleaner, I run a contract cleaning business, they say, okay, here's your SIC code, and here are the injuries within your industry. And then they give it a number. And this is kind of like if you do a lot of speeding, you're going to get caught, and eventually you're going to get a speeding ticket, and then your insurance rates go up. Well, the same thing occurs for work-related injuries within the insurance business. So they come back and they say, okay, we're going to give you a number, what they call a modification score. And the modification score will say you're going to be at a 0.9, and if you go to a 1 or a 1.1 as it relates to workplace-related injuries, we're going to increase your insurance rates by 20%. Well, if you're paying $10,000 a month in insurance, that rate could go up by 20%, in addition to the workers' comp claims, the fact that a worker is no longer on that job site, you've got to bring an inexperienced worker in. So there's many financial silos that revolve around what happens when a worker gets injured. And these are not small numbers. We had someone within our industry who pulled a battery out of an auto scrubber, wrenched their back, and ended up on disability from doing that. Now, it's not that we don't remove batteries. The question is should that person have been removing the battery, and was there a better or a safer procedure for removing that battery? And so you see everything from specific incidents, the issue of morale. I think that a safe work environment helps with employee morale and makes them feel as though their employer has a concern or cares for them, and that certainly creates an environment where it's more conscientious. Now, this is the best way or simplest way in order to do a workplace risk assessment. One is to identify what those hazards are, and we're going to give you what some of those hazards are within our industry, something like ladder safety, potentially a slip and fall, or somebody not wearing glasses or gloves or ear protection when they're working. Assessing the risks, the injury, or the hazard, understanding what could be harmed or what the potential harm is, what could be done, people that are mixing chemicals, people that are using overly harsh chemicals may create a specific risk. I want to know how many of the incidents occurred, and I want to know what type of incident actually occurred. Then once we get the risk analysis and we get a list, and you got to have all the data and information. Many times when we're working at the user level, part of our assessment is their safety policy, their safety training, their regulatory compliance. And then we will ask our client for a list of workers' comp injuries or workers' comp claims, because one of the best and easiest ways and the most inexpensive way to drive cost out of cleaning operations is to have a comprehensive safety program and to have safety training, whether it's one-on-one safety training, whether it's classroom training, whether it's a supervisor just showing someone how to don and doff gloves in a healthcare environment. Safety, again, becomes part of the culture of the organization. What control measures are needed for these specific hazards? Then it's a matter of implementation, and the implementation piece is the most important piece, is performing the actual training and then measuring, did we reduce injuries? Did we reduce any specific incidents so that we can measure the return on the investment of that specific training? And the training need not be complex. And we've done a lot of safety training within operations, and a lot of the workers will walk up to us and they'll actually thank us for showing them the proper ways to do certain things. And then last but not least is the fifth component, which is our processes. Everything is policy-driven. Everything is process-driven. Is that working effectively? And have we been able to eliminate or reduce risks and or potential injuries? So everything should be measured and everything should be documented, and I should be able to quantify exactly what the progress is. And it's not something that's it's not a burden by any means. This is not nearly as complicated, let's say, as workloading a building or changing a cleaning system. Okay, let's dive into worker safety. These are the statistics on frontline workers. And so our pay rates as far as in-house operations and also outsourced operations, we're a big business. Now, most of this is done from back injuries, elbow injuries, the potential of certain types of harsh chemicals being put on skin, or respiration, when people are respirating certain chemicals in a work environment, like a harsh acid cleaner that might be used through a pressure washer for cleaning a bathroom, or if it's something that's atomization of a disinfectant within a work environment, and we'll give you some tips on that. There are many different injuries, and we'll cover what those injuries can be, and they're all over the board. Now, the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics puts us in at about number 4 or 5. When they look at everything from hotel housekeepers to custodians, janitors, service workers, it's everything from how the body is reacting to slips, falls, and trips. Now, I know that Tennant works with the National Floor Safety Institute, which has some slip-resistant, and we have a module on the safety component of that, but we don't have time to cover that today. But if you do have slips and falls, because when we're cleaning, we're standing on water. There's also slip-resistant floor finishes, which have ASTM or UL requirements. There's a lot of information that's available on that, and Tennant can help you with it. This is showing the injuries by the occupation. And so what you're seeing is the way that they track that is they're looking at musculoskeletal disorders. That's what the MSD than the small s's of the body. And so they track the actual injuries, whether it's shoulder, there's a lot of back injuries, arm injuries, there's a lot of wrist injuries. A lot of the ladies in our business have arthritis in their hands, and repetitively using trigger sprayers many times can cause that to get worse. And so there can be leg sprains, and so they track where the actual injury is occurring. There's a lot of lifting in our business. So if someone is dumping 200 trash cans a night and the average trash can weighs, let's say, 15, 20 pounds, that repetitive motion can cause back injuries. And I see some custodians wearing back braces, and so we realize that some people come to the job with injuries, but the issue is can we teach them how to effectively lift up a trash can so that they're not bending and that they're using their legs or stronger parts of their body and they're not twisting when they're doing that lifting as well. Now, in the field, when we look at just the SIM standard alone, when we do site-based certification, we actually go on to the job site and do an assessment. And so the customer has to submit their paperwork. So we will review their bloodborne pathogens policy. We will look at their HAZCOM program. We will look at their safety policy if they have one. And then we go on to the job site, and I will tell you that we're not correct, but OSHA is correct, is that most of our SIM-certified firms, which we would consider to be one of the more elite members of the cleaning operations, because they've gone through an assessment process, bloodborne pathogens is the one that seems to have the greatest amount of difficulty and or failure. It is also by far the highest fine within OSHA, and it is the one that is the most important, especially when you're looking at healthcare. The second one is HAZCOM programs. Do I have a hazardous communication program? Did we teach our people what the 9 placards are for the new SDS? And do they have an understanding of how to read an SDS sheet? Now, that training doesn't take more than about 20 to 30 minutes. I don't get overly burdened with all the details of SDS, especially when dealing with a multilingual workforce or a special needs workforce. But by law, we are required to show them what those placards are, what they mean, and then how to functionally read an SDS sheet and what areas to look for. And I've done that with large groups of folks, and it doesn't take more than 20 or 30 minutes. The respiratory issue and the respiratory protection and ear protection are another two. There is an OSHA standard for permissible noise levels. Most of the vacuum cleaners in our industry hover at around 48 to 68 or 70 dB. Most of the standards in our industry require 70 dB. The auto scrubbers are now coming with more and more insulation because they're using 2 back motors and other motors, and they're a lot quieter than they were, let's say, 10 or 20 years ago. And the very one at the very bottom, the personal protective equipment, is another one that we look for. Is do they have glasses? Do they have gloves? Do they have the right type of glove? And a lot of people will say, well, you know, we're cutting our budget. We're going to use vinyl gloves. The difference between vinyl gloves and a nitrile glove is probably about $3 per 100. And when I look at it, the nitrile glove is just more sturdy, it's more puncture resistant, it's more chemical resistant, and it's just a better glove for the extra $3. I can justify the $3 by finding out that the chemical itself could require nitrile gloves. And so not everybody reads these SDS sheets, and sometimes people use vinyl gloves. Then someone from OSHA makes a visit, they read the sheet, they look at the glove, and that could represent a fine or a specific violation. So it's very important to read the documents related to cleaning and then understand what your responsibilities are by law. These are documents, and there's your SIC code if you were asking what that was. It's 7349, bloodborne pathogens, HAZCOM, face protection, hand protection. I'm very focused on airborne contaminants or indoor air quality. And also, there's a lot of ladder accidents that happen in our industry, which are almost unnecessary because we have telescopic poles. And some of these telescopic poles will reach to the second story. I can certainly put dusting tools on those telescopic poles, but most of the time what I see is I see people that don't know how to use ladders, and they don't understand that many times there should be two people working on that ladder, and there are specifications for an entire books on ladder safety. This particular document was put together and it kind of gave a number. I think that this number is very low. When I talk to our clients about workers' comp claims, and I'll tell you where it comes up the highest, and it's really around K through 12 schools and universities, is that the workers' comp claims are highest in June, July, and August. And it's because they're stripping floors, they're mapping classrooms, they're moving furniture, they're cleaning the dorms in a university. And so the workers' comp claims escalate in those 3 months because they're doing heavy-duty restoration work. And that's really when safety training should occur. So for some of the distributors that are on this call, summer's coming. You should be assembling a safety program looking at safety products, and I've got pictures of them at the end of the presentation, to make sure that you're doing some safety training before they move in that direction, selling them safety boots, making sure they have stripper shoes for slip and falls, and that they have certain types of equipment for moving furniture out of those classrooms without having to do bending and lifting. Now, these are some of the tasks that were outlined by a gentleman that put together a document on the hazards of cleaning, and he comes out of the safety world. And so it's dusting and scrubbing, vacuuming, mopping. A lot of people don't know how to frame a floor. And then when I look at mopping, I'd just rather have either a micro scrubber, a 20-inch single disc scrubber, or some type of scrubber, because mopping causes a lot of back injuries, a lot of shoulder injuries, and a lot of repetitive motion. Then you're going back and forth to a bucket. And even if you have a small area, a micro scrubber will do not only a better job, but it can also reduce work-related injuries. The big one is stripping and buffing, trash handling, and moving furniture. Those three seem to garner some of the highest injuries within our industry. Sometimes we see a couple of custodians that decide that they're going to, make an Olympics out of tossing trash bags into a high dumpster. And that particular Olympics was causing all kinds of back and torso injuries. And once the manager found out that it was going on, he was able to stop that particular event from occurring. But sometimes people are just trying to have a little fun, and that fun can turn into a $20,000, $30,000, $50,000 incident of injuries within an operation. This is a document that I would recommend that you download. This is a document that was put together on janitorial safety. It was done by the California OSHA folks, and there were a bunch of folks in our industry that I knew that were participating in the document, and it's one of the top two documents that we'll recommend on worker safety. It is directly related to the cleaning industry. And so the prevention program was based on having internal champions. It was based on that employees understood what their responsibility was, and then what nobody wants to go to work and get injured and then come home and not feel good about that specific injury. Being injured is no fun, and having a reoccurring injury definitely is no fun. And so it's a responsibility of the employer, but there's also employee responsibilities that they're following that training and to make sure that they understand what they're supposed to be responsible for. Again, hazardous ID and control, incident investigation, and the biggest piece is that there's a very strong, of all the return on investments of training, and we're working on certified training centers and certified trainers, and we're verifying content now, is to make sure that the training is occurring and that you're focused on best practices and processes, and many times mechanization reduces workplace injuries versus cleaning something by hand. So there's indirect cost and there's direct cost of workplace injuries. The biggest thing is absenteeism in cleaning operations. When you have 100, 200, 300 employees or more, an injured employee represents lost time. Then you've got a startup. It's interrupting the operation. If you have a floor job and someone gets hurt, then everybody feels bad about it, and it's disrupting, let's say, project work, or it's disrupting the flow of work within the operation. Repair, replacing any equipment that was related to the injury, overtime costs that workers have to fill in, any potential fines, time spent investigating the injury, the paperwork from the injury, retraining people from the specific injury, loss of skills of a valuable employee that may know the buildings and know what it is that they're doing, any potential morale, and then how is it affecting insurance rates. And so a lot of people, they want to oversimplify it and go, well, that only cost us X. And I come back and say it costs far, far more than the training that you could have done, making sure that everybody has a culture of safety. Now, this is the second document that we recommend. And this is a document that also has a lot of value. It talks about safe practices. It talks about chemical safety, ergonomics, proper lifting, and it's an easy read, and it's very much an industry-specific document. Okay, musculoskeletal disorders. In some countries like Canada, this is a regulation. Now, in the United States, this is not a regulation, but this is what I consider to be an issue of safety. So we'll look at everything from aluminum mop handles that are adjustable to keep workers from having their elbow above their shoulder while they're working. The handle weight of a vacuum is critical when I look at housekeepers, and it's a repetitive motion, vacuuming within a hospital or vacuuming within a school or a university. And so what we want to look at is there anything that's occurring from the use of our products that may be causing some of those injuries from an ergonomics perspective. And we do have some decks and slides on ergonomics. Some of that we've embedded in the tip area of this presentation. So exerting force, awkward positions, repetitive motion, quick motion, jerking motions, lifting up a 5-gallon pail of chemical, and even walking at 10 feet because of the nature of the fact that it's awkward and it weighs about 50 pounds. Any potential vibration or the way that people are gripping tools can have an impact on musculoskeletal disorders. The activities in our business are not difficult to define. It's vacuuming, it's mopping. Many times in cleaning operations, we see the ladies using a 2-gallon bucket versus a 4-gallon bucket. A gallon of water weighs 8.64 pounds. If you take that times 4, you're getting up there in the 35-pound range where people are lifting buckets into high sinks. If I don't have a floor-based sink, they're wringing out mops, and they don't know the correct procedure on how to wring out a mop. Using swing floor machines, bouncing them up against walls. And I'll be honest with you, I prefer square deck floor machines. I believe that they're more intuitive. I believe that they're easier to teach, and in many cases they're safer in the cleaning operation. I also like soil suspension or encapsulation versus bonnet cleaning for the identical reason. Trash removal, teaching people how to remove trash out of a trash can. People say, well, just lift up the bag. I said, well, that's not the best practice for cleaning operations. I need to teach them to set the trash can on its side, lay a liner on the ground, and to pull that 40 or 50 pounds out of that can without lifting it. And so there are correct procedures like any industry for lifting, moving objects, again, stooping, bending, jerking, twisting motions while lifting weight can cause an injury, and it happens very quickly. Whenever I get an injury, I always get mad at myself because it happened within seconds, and then it's weeks of pain, aggravation, going to doctors, not doing certain things, and I try to avoid that as much as possible by having a level of awareness as to what I'm picking up. And I'm no spring chicken. I'm comfortably in my 50s, so I have an awareness of the fact that I'm not going to be lifting up a 100-pound floor machine like I was doing when I was in my 30s. Cleaning tasks are labor-intensive. There's repetitive motion, equipment, heavy physical work. These are all the elements that you want to take a look at. And so what you see on the right is you see a worker working with a microfiber trowel. Now, this makes them more productive, but it also changes the position of their hand while they're performing glass, walls, or stainless steel cleaning. Sometimes we'll give them a telescopic pole to make sure that they're not doing high reaching if they have a shoulder injury or potentially a neck issue. You also see at the bottom, working at heights. A lot of our industry is high cleaning. Sometimes I need scaffolding or I need a specific lift, and I try to avoid ladders. And there are a lot of lightweight carbon and aluminum poles now that will reach the second story if I need to dust something that's that high. This graph is showing all the injuries, and now you can see where it comes in graph form. Lower back is the high one, neck is the next one down, knees, shoulders, hands, and wrists come into play, and probably 50% of these could be focused on to reduce workplace injuries. Okay, some safety tips and recommendations. Technical training, let me say that there's an ROI on training as long as you have your data. So trained workers have less job-related injuries. We can document that. We know it from gathering data from clients where we performed assessments. Trained workers are more productive. Trained workers have higher quality assurance scores, less HAIs. They have less complaints, and we're focusing on happy clients in buildings, healthy students in buildings. We want to make sure that we're focusing on clean buildings. Clean buildings normally are safer than dirty ones, and that's really the center of the plate as to what we do. Trained workers cause less asset damage, and trained workers can reduce and contain insurance premiums if they understand safe work practices. Okay. Management commitment, employee participation, again, a culture of safety. Analysis of the hazards, understanding some ergonomic risks, looking at record keeping assessments, and then providing solution and coming up with some training is the best way to approach this. Now, let me give you some tips as we're taking you home here. Bending at the knees, relaxed grips on floor machines and wands for vacuum cleaners and mop handles. Avoiding bending the wrist as much as possible, minimizing wringing mops and cloths by hand. I see a lot of people grabbing microfiber cloths and wringing them out by hand. I get that, but what you're seeing is that sometimes the ladies tell me that hurts. And so sometimes we can look at a charging bucket where we're putting in a certain amount of liquid into a bucket with microfiber cloths where I don't have to dip them in a bucket and then wring them out by hand. They're automatically pre-moistened in that charging bucket. And so some of the products will help with the safety components. Switching hands periodically, removing trash without lifting. You heard me talk about setting it on a liner and pulling it out. Not compacting waste receptacles. I see cleaning workers pushing the trash down with their hands. You could have a needle in that trash can. You could have razor blades in that trash, and they're pushing it down with their hands. There's a procedure where you can take a trash can and push that trash down in a large 44-gallon brute without touching it with your hands. No hammer throwing trash bags in the dumpster, using tilt carts for large trash. There are also motorized tilt trucks, and there are also motorized housekeeping carts that are available in our industry to prevent housekeepers from having to push 200, 300-pound carts through a facility, especially on carpet in a casino or a hotel. So there are some considerations for that. If you have heavy trash and you're looking to move it, there's a battery there and there's a switch and you can charge them, and they're motorized. And motorized tilt trucks are available from a couple different manufacturers. Low vibration machines, easy finger controls, low handle weights, padded handles. Machines that are brush or motor propelled. The smaller scrubbers are usually they're usually what we call pad assist. The cylindrical brush machines are also pad assist. If you're on a larger machine where I'm having to push 30 gallons of water, I'd rather have a motor propelled. Or over on the right you see a rider. In this case, that's a rider carpet cleaning machine for interim maintenance. I want machines that are quiet. If you want, you can download an app from the App Store or from your smartphone, and they're free. They're dB readers that go onto your phone, and I keep a couple of them on there for when we're in the field. Now, certainly they're not as accurate as a $50 standalone dB meter, but if you're looking for something inexpensive on your phone, the numbers are pretty close. Torque on running certain types of floor machines. Auto scrubbers have visibility or lights, what I call looking at sight lines to understand so you can see over the machine. The center of gravity is that rider stable. Bending in good posture, lightweight machines that are easier to control. The ergonomic vacuuming tips, I try to teach workers not to move back and forth if they're in large areas, to use a figure 8 pattern where they hold the machine with the handle on an upright vacuum on the side, and they just walk up and walk back and walk up and walk back. Many of these machines are at the 70 dB or less. They're certified by the Carpet and Rug Institute. And so standing in an upright position, I see all kinds of pictures, and I see people grabbing mop handles, vacuum cleaners, and equipment, and the first thing they do is they bend over. You don't want to be in that position. You don't want to be crouching and bending over when you're cleaning. You want to stand in an upright position, whether you're mopping, whether you're vacuuming, or whether you're stripping a floor. It's critical to stand in an upright position to make sure that it's not only awkward, but it can potentially cause a back injury. These are tips for mopping, and mopping is one of the big categories in our business. If you have low-profile floor drains, that certainly helps. Most workers do not know how to frame a floor. They're extending themselves too far to the right, too far to the left. The guys are using large, like 32-ounce extra-large mops. The ladies want to use 16 or 20-ounce mops. Some of the microfiber tube mops, which you see in this photo, can also have more drag or more resistance because microfiber has some superior cleaning technology. Some people use aluminum handles. I highly recommend lightweight handles that are adjustable. When you adjust them, you adjust them to microphone high. Flat mops are also in use in certain verticals like healthcare. Systematic overlapping passes. The bullet that says do not cross midline with arms, that's where someone's trying to mop a floor that's like 8 to 10 feet wide, and they're trying to go from baseboard to baseboard, and it's too far of a distance. Framing the floor is faster, it keeps the soil off the baseboards, and it keeps the worker in that midline with their arms and their shoulders upright, and make sure that you take breaks when you're doing a lot of mopping. The average production rate for mopping a floor is about 5,000 square feet per hour. The chemical piece, you have a lot of options, and when you're working with Tennant, you can certainly use the technology around cleaning with water, the H2O technology, the RBO technology. But there's also a lot of people on this call that are using chemicals within their operation. And this can be an area, a couple things. One, if you're using chemicals and you can go to sustainable or green chemistry, I highly recommend that you do that for many, many different reasons. If there's a performance requirement and you have to use a degreaser with a high pH, or you have to use a phosphoric acid or a hydrochloric acid, I recommend that you do that on a lockup basis, that you make sure that you're doing that with not using it every day. When we go into schools and we see hydrochloric acid in an elementary school that's packed with 5, 6, 7, 8, 9-year-old kids, it's something that we just recommend that they get out of the operation. And so read the labels, understand the SDS sheets. If you see a skull and crossbone in one of the 9 placards, you know you've got something that's hot. Make sure that you read the directions on the labels and that you follow those directions. There's also storage requirements, not to store certain acids next to bleach. Now, the issue around aerosols and safety glasses, that will be on the SDS sheet. It will tell you some chemicals require a full face shield versus glasses. Make sure you dilute the chemical properly, and then make sure that you use a dilution control center or a portion control pack, whatever you're using in the way of mixing it, and make sure that your folks are trained never to mix chemicals together. They think that, you know, if 1 glug is good, 2 glugs is better, and I'll just throw the whole gallon in the bucket. Crowding chemical does not make it more effective, and it can also be dangerous. Never use unlabeled containers. We see this all the time in buildings. I see people putting chemical in Mountain Dew bottles. I didn't realize that a trigger sprayer fit on a Mountain Dew bottle, but on a 16-ounce Mountain Dew bottle, it fits pretty well. You don't know what's in the bottle. If a couple of kids grab trigger sprayers off of a cart or someone gets injured, we had a custodian that had a bottle on a cart. The bottle started to get loose. He didn't know it, and when he lifted up the bottle fell off the trigger sprayer, landed on the floor, and the chemical splashed up onto his face. And so accidents happen on job sites. And so make sure it's labeled. Everybody should know where the SDS sheet is by law. The SDS sheet should also be in multiple languages if you're working with a Mexican-American workforce or a French workforce, or even if it's a workforce that's Asian where you have a lot of people that speak Cantonese. You should have those translated to make sure that they understand by law what those SDS sheets say. Don't breathe it, don't drink it, don't put food on your restroom cart where you have chemicals. Don't puncture or collapse aerosol cans. Make sure that you read the storage requirements. Keep certain chemicals that may have perfumes away from HVAC systems or potentially from the HVAC system or anywhere where you would have heat. Now, these are the new binders for the GHS program. By law, you've had to have gone through training, and by law, you have to have these SDS sheets converted. Now, your old MSDS sheets, by law, need to be kept on job sites, or at least not on the job site, but in records within your facility for 30 years. 12, wash hands. Make sure that you wash your hands frequently before eating, drinking, smoking. Make sure that you have chemicals if it comes into contact with your eyes. Some people have portable eye wash stations in their custodial closet. I'll show you what that looks like in a second. If there's any chemical spills or leakage from a drum, make sure you report that information. Make sure that you know how to do a spill cleanup and how to dispose of the waste. And then make sure that you know how to handle equipment. Tennant has a lot of wall charts. And we were just doing a training session for ISSA, and somebody was asking a question about processes. And I said, well, if you're using a machine, you're not just teaching the cleaning process, you also have to teach them how to use the machine. And so that's a critical part of the safety piece. Last couple slides. These are safety tools in our business. And there's your portable eye wash station. I look for comfortable glasses. There's your safety belt. There's your stripper shoes. There's table movers, earplugs, earmuffs, vinyl gloves, latex gloves, nitrile gloves, safety vests, SDS sheets. Just the safety belt alone creates a high level of awareness when people are doing cleaning and lifting, and I see a lot of organizations where there's a safety culture. You also see the protective suit. If you're using pressure washing, there are also steel toe waterproof boots. I own a pair of steel toe boots, and I own a safety hat and glasses and ear protection because sometimes our projects take us onto industrial sites where it's a requirement of their safety policy. And this is an important slide, and I realize that some of the distributors that are on this call sell these items, some do not. But for the K-12 schools and the universities that are on this call, you're going to be doing this in June, July, and August. These are lifting devices for desks and classrooms. It certainly takes the risk away from it. It makes it a lot easier. And I actually have a couple of dollies, not this sophisticated, that I use when I'm moving furniture in my own home. You also have some of these old tables, and some of the school districts are repurposing these tables from the federal government because they're getting them inexpensive, or they may even get them for free. But there are devices for transporting these large, heavy tables. You can put 2 of them on there at a time, and it just makes it easier for getting those tables out of those rooms. And the same thing goes for chairs, and then you see the small one there for desks and chairs in order to get 5 or 6 or 10 chairs out of there at a time.